I'm rolling.
Okay. So thank you for participating in the interviews.
Sure thing.
And can you tell us your name and where you're from?
I'm Phil Cox. I teach in the philosophy department. I've been here, I was just thinking as I walked in, this is my 18th year here. I kind of came late to, a little bit late to academia. I was a bunch of different jobs before, including union organizer and service rep of District 65 and United Auto Workers and some community work as well. So I'm a latecomer, even though this is my 18th year, I'm a latecomer to academia.
It sounds like there's a story there. Your union work.
There's some good stories and some bad stories.
The Labor Center.
Yeah.
What was your introduction to the Labor Center?
My introduction to the Labor Center would be mostly through colleagues. I was, the young man on the totem pole 18 years ago, but I became friends with a couple of people in the history department, fitting for oral history, that taught courses that were either labor studies courses or cross-listed with them or in support of the program, in women's history and in labor history. Most of those people are retired now, happily, but I became friends with them first, socially and academically, and then I picked up on their both community and academic interest in issues political and labor. So they introduced me in that way to the Labor Center and to labor courses.
Fantastic.
And I eventually had a number of my courses cross-listed: political philosophy, philosophy of law, etc., listed or enlisted in the labor studies outfit.
Can you say more about that? You enlisted, meaning?
Well, at the time, we had a more functioning minor. So a lot of departments, particularly sociology, history, occasionally in philosophy, political science, taught courses that were like Betty Mitchell's women's labor history course. It's handmade for that, or Dave Berger's progressive take on economics 101. In support of the minor, a lot of us had our courses cross-listed with the Labor Center, and often tailored them, like my political philosophy class. A little bit less theory, a little bit more praxis in that way. So when I say enlisted, I mean refined in such a way as to credibly count towards a labor studies influenced course. So that's affected my teaching and also my social circle around here. It's great to be with around people of like minds and whatnot.
Do you have any stories where your students had aha moments about labor history, labor struggles?
Aha moments. Let's see. I guess these would count. These aren't 5-star level ones, but last semester I taught one of the privileges of my job here is we can teach basically any course you want to, so long as it fits into some category or another. But I try to keep both to keep my students fresh and me fresh. I try to do a sort of new course or a generally new course a year. So last fall I had just come out of a retirement party for some of my mentor professors who at the time in Amherst really formed courses in the departments in African American studies, in Marxist or leftist or progressive economics, and in political philosophy, and in feminism. At the time it was very hard to find courses, much less departments or majors or PhDs in any of those fields. And that they had been all celebrating 30 or 40 years ago when they came to it, teaching these subjects as being very, very new and unique to the campus. So it made me think, since I have the opportunity to teach what I want, I just invented a course, plagiarizing some of their work or their influences on me. I taught a course just called Radical Philosophies. And what I meant by that was a sampling of theory and praxis among several different fields. Mine's philosophy, but it's a broad field. Philosophy, political economy, history, labor history, critical sociology, a little bit of progressive literary criticism, and not least feminism and so-called minority studies. So I just gave, in keeping with my mentors there, I just gave a course, a smorgasbord of things across the spectrum there. And I was finally at the end of the story here. Several students in the class, I had them read, Karl Marx would be turning over in his grave to hear this, but I had them read all of 40 or 50 pages of Marx and his critics and defenders in a small segment on Marxism and its critics and defenders. And several students in class and otherwise, first of all, some had no idea what century Karl Marx lived in, or what we mean by the Industrial Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution, and much less orthodox, unorthodox Marxism, etc. So it kind of maybe more for me than for the students as an aha moment, where several of them had said in class and outside, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that people still read Marx, or that there was a subdiscipline regarding so-called post-Marxism or unorthodox Marxism, etc., that it was a living and vibrant set of ideas, for better or for worse, in a half a dozen different fields." So for them it was a discovery that the influence of Marx and his contemporaries and successors, the influence they have had on the world. And it was an aha moment for me to realize that however well educated students are in those half a dozen fields, at many universities, possibly including ours, they're not getting a good piece of that political economics, philosophy, etc., history. So that was kind of a surprise for all of us. Like, for them, oh my gosh, we're reading Karl Marx. I didn't even know it was in English, I think one of them said. So that was a moment of discovery, I believe, for them, for me too.
Do you have an idea of what would happen if the Labor Center was closed? Like, politically, what would happen to the future of this community?
I would take it as another, in the case of our university, a very problematic step in further removing the academy from the community, not just with the outreach stuff in New Bedford, but with engaging students with whether it's coursework or internships or like-minded professors, engaging students, making that leap between theory in the classroom or the seminar room and what goes on in the quote-unquote real world in our communities and in our nation and in the world. So I think the labor study and the many programs and courses it supports are, it's fundamental to hold on to those remaining links between the academy that can be distant and immunizing of itself from real world politics or real world political realities. And the Labor Center, both in courses and in students and in mixing people together, maintains that link in a way that's, I think, has been enormously valuable over 2 generations now, but is in desperate need. As back to that first anecdote, as many students were delighted to see that, to understand the phrase political economy, and delighted to see that leftist theory or progressive theory, however you define it, have speak to their lives and their parents' lives and their communities' lives, and the scaling back of some places working class studies, but let's say labor-oriented courses in the center here in particular. The scale of that, much less the loss of it, I think would be another radical break with that link between town and gown or larger communities outside the university and what goes on or should go on in the hearts and minds of students and faculty.
Okay. And do other stories rise to the surface when you think of the Labor Center?
Oh, well, here's one. It's a little dated, but not much, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. As a matter of course, I integrate different kinds of thought, let's just call it blanket progressive thought, into ethics or philosophy of law or philosophy history courses. And as a matter of course, I had included in an intro to ethics course some material, as many textbooks do, on feminist approaches to ethics or feminist critiques of orthodox thought. And I was just using, as the authors had, the word feminist as it's in perfect currency. And I remember just a few years ago, a student saying with some bemusement, you know, I think this author is a lowers his voice, a feminist. And that was the first time, it was an aha moment for me anyway, first time I had heard someone use feminism in the way that maybe, let's say, communists were whispered about in the 50s or 40s or 50s, as though it were a dirty word. And I don't take the student's reaction as representative, but I've since encountered any number of students who feel like feminism is sort of in that slippery and bizarre category of beyond the pale, underground, marginal thinking. And I consider it as meaningful or as common as, let's say, liberal or conservative. So I think it's important, and that was a revelation to me. But I think it was also a revelation to some students to see, as a matter of course, feminist thought is being treated as part and parcel of history or philosophy or political science or the world we live in. So I hope that stuck with them.
Great. So those are my questions.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now Mona's going to get some more shots.
Basically, we call them cutaway shots, or B-roll, really. So
Yeah.
just
so
to
we can talk about
have a
anything
variety.
Okay.
informally. And
Sure.
If you have any, if you want to do some hand gestures, that always helps. So we
Let's
can
see,
encourage people.
was I successful in not?
Thank you.
Studs Terkel.
Yeah.
The late great Studs Terkel. It must be an inspiration to both of you to know.
Yeah, I actually am a writer, and somebody told me that my project reminded me of some Studs Terkel books, because I have a project that's about workers talking to each other as literature, as poetry or fiction. And they were like, oh, it's a contemporary Studs Terkel.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's
yeah.
great. I was a little wet. I was a little green 35 years ago when I didn't have much of a broad-minded education as an undergrad, but it was sort of my first introduction to progressive thinking or critiques in grad school. And I remember hearing the first, had a radio program in Chicago, and much of which is incorporated in his working book. But